But after much deliberation, I went with Belgium over Italy. I would say that Belgium just have a bit too much for them. So now the big one. Who wins between France and Portugal? Well, there's going to be two major international titles on the trot for the French. Well, if you learn anything from this video, it's to never trust me on predictions. Hello and welcome back to the Hasbashan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today I thought I would make a video simply just giving my thoughts on England as a whole during Euro 2020. As you might have gathered, I'm uploading this on the day of the final, but I'm recording it after the semi-final win against Denmark, which of course England won in extra time thanks to a Harry Kane rebound from his saved penalty. I'm only telling you this just to give a bit of context as to when I am filming and indeed writing this script, but in this video I'll be talking about the team, the supporters and their mannerisms throughout it, and a tweet which really caught my eye, which was published in light of England's semi-final win, because I just had something to say on it. Or I had to say something on it. I'll let you be the judge of that. I'll start off with the squad as a whole, since the players, managers and coaching staff are, obviously, the crux of this whole story. What is indisputable from this tournament is that Gareth Southgate, the manager, has proven all the naysayers wrong, with accusations that he was either too nice or didn't have a winning mentality being swiftly disproven by England's performances throughout. He has done things his way, and when #SouthgateOut was trending on Twitter after his mere team selections in the group stages and against Germany, more on that later on, he blocked it out, stuck to his guns, and has ultimately been vindicated. People have used his poor club CV as a basis for a supposed lack of winning mentality and a stick with which to beat him. I've certainly seen that a few times on my social media feeds, with the only thing on his club CV being a 2009 relegation with Middlesbrough, which does stick out like a very sore thumb. However, managing a club and a nation are two completely separate entities and require two completely different styles of man management and coaching as a whole, and you don't need to be an amazing club manager to succeed on the international stage. That's not to say it doesn't help, because managers like Roberto Mancini, Luis Enrique, and to an extent Didier Deschamps as well, have been successful at both club and international level, but it isn't, and never has been, a prerequisite. Southgate knows how to get the best out of this England squad and their players at major tournaments, and considering he is just the second manager to make the semi-finals of both the World Cup and the Euros as England manager in their history after Sir Alf Ramsey, whose Euro 68 campaign literally started at the semi-finals, there's no way that anyone could say now that Southgate isn't the right man for the manager's role. The players too did their jobs in the groups and have seriously upped their game in the knockout stages, especially the likes of Harry Kane, Kyle Walker and Luke Shaw. Undoubtedly, the team were a bit too defensive and cautious in the groups at times, only scoring twice in 3 games and playing out a second half against the Czech Republic where nothing of any note happened right up until the very end of it, but they held their shape well, rarely took risks and were able to navigate their way through it in first place without breaking too much of a sweat, barring perhaps at some point in their game against Scotland. The round of 16 clash with Germany really showcased the intent this team had to go places at this tournament, as it was the first time they came up against a really big hitter and they could have crumbled under the pressure like they have done so many times in the past, but instead, after surviving a few scares, they really took the game by the scruff of the neck and were deserving winners come the final whistle, something which even the German press admitted to. Their match against Ukraine was extremely convincing from start to finish, and up against Denmark in the semis, who were buoyed on by what had happened to Christian Eriksen at the start of the tournament, they showed their resilience to recover from the inevitable setback, which came in the form of a fantastic Mikkel Damsgaard free kick to turn the game on its head and really dominate proceedings from about the 60th minute onwards. They've done everything the nation has hoped they would, and then some. Ironically enough, the 4 standout individuals at this tournament are arguably the ones who have been the most maligned over the past couple of years or so, namely Southgate, Luke Shaw, Jordan Pickford, who has looked really assured between the sticks and at dealing with crosses into the box, something which was a weakness in his game at Everton, and of course, the main man, Raheem Sterling. He came into this tournament after a difficult season at Man City, and I really wasn't impressed with him towards the back end of the campaign, but for England he has been a man transformed, scoring 3 goals, assisting 1 and playing a key role in 2 more. Anyone who is calling for Sterling not to start in this team, and I will admit that I was one of them, has been proven dramatically wrong over the course of the last month, something which Sterling has a tendency to do time and time again. His willingness to incessantly drive at defenders has made him a constant menace, and whilst his decision making at the crucial moment has sometimes left us wanting, it hasn't put him off or phased him one bit from going again and again. His movement in the box, as is so often the case with Sterling, has been outstanding, and all you need to show that is his 2 goals against the Czech Republic and Germany, where he bought himself half a yard of space knowing where the ball would be crossed into, and by the time the defenders realised where he was, it was too late, and the ball was in the back of the net. Maybe he should be playing at striker more often, and it is of my opinion that striker is his best position, but he was undeniably England's main man in front of goal, especially when Harry Kane had a lacklustre start to the finals, stepping up to take the Spurs marksman's mantle and keep the country dreaming. If this man doesn't have a knighthood of what he's done both on and off the pitch at some point, then I have no idea what constitutes a knighthood anymore. Above all else though, they represent everything that is fair and equal in the world and stand for everything that our government does not, which is one of the reasons why I love this England team so much. As just one example, during the last month or so, Jordan Henderson quote tweeted a transgender fan who attended the Germany match, thanking them for their support and saying that football is for everyone, no matter who you are, which of course should be an ingrained belief in every football fan's mind by this point, but still somehow, but also expectedly, it's not. This team does not just have spirit, drive and passion, but also empathy, care and solidarity with/for those who are discriminated against on a regular basis, and it's genuine too, unlike when it comes out of certain politicians' mouths, which makes this team that little bit more admirable and inspirational for the younger generation. Now we'll move on to us, the fans, who have been what can only be described as a mixed bag. Of course, we shouldn't let the deplorable fans represent us in any way, as most of the England supporters have been fine, pretty well supportive and backing our side to the hills, irrespective of what is going on. However, as per normal, there are some who let this country down, such as the person who decided to shine a laser light in Kasper Schmeichel's eye just before the penalty against Kane. Apparently sanctions have now been taken against the FA or England as a result, and those who booed the German and Danish national anthems, the latter of which coming across as extremely insensitive given what happened to Eriksen just a few weeks ago. We also have those who are angry that players take the knee pre-match or show their solidarity to anti-discrimination causes, and who make their feelings well known on social media by saying that they want the team to fail because they promote supposedly Marxist ideologies and the violent and dangerous cause of Black Lives Matter, which, in case you couldn't recall, is clearly all about wanting white people to be subordinate to black people. I hope there was enough sarcasm in my voice. Some have stated that this England team doesn't represent the country in any way and that they want politics to be removed from the sport altogether, which is pretty much impossible anyway, especially when you look at football's history worldwide. However, I can almost guarantee you that if the players were promoting the disintegration of BLM and similar causes, which I know will obviously and thankfully never happen, it would be a joyous moment for them to see this England team reflect the widespread beliefs of the British public. Apparently. I'm sorry, but these people need to wake up, realise what they're saying is not only morally wrong but also hypocritical, and support this team through thick and thin, irrespective of what they choose to stand for, because at the end of the day, it is the England national team after all. However, I also want to look at another side of the coin, and that is the England fans who feel an extreme sense of entitlement to doing well at tournaments. You have to remember what has happened to England in the past 2 decades of major international tournaments to gain a sense of perspective as to why some supporters' entitlement makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. At Euro 2000 and the 2014 World Cup, they couldn't even make it past the group stages. They were battered 4-1 by Germany in the round of 16 in South Africa back in 2010. They were dumped out of Euro 2016 embarrassingly by Iceland, and they couldn't even make it to Euro 2008. The 2018 World Cup was the first time they reached a semi-final in any competition since 1996, and only the 3rd time outside of tournaments that they have hosted in their entire history, and England couldn't even get that far with the supposed golden generation at their disposal at any tournament that they took part in. Of course, there is an extremely talented crop of players at their disposal right now, but England's men's team have not done this well on a consistent basis at tournaments, arguably since the 1960s, so you cannot presume that England are going to immediately dominate everyone who stands in their path. It seems as though some of the fans have subverted the meaning behind the incredible song 3 Lions to make it seem as though the song is about the fact that we should always be winning everything in our path, when in reality it is of course about dashed dreams but continuing to hope for the best in spite of what has gone before. Reaching the final of a major tournament is something that we have only done once before in our men's footballing history and only twice in our women's footballing history, and we shouldn't automatically be expectant of this team to take us to one right off the bat. Whilst obviously they have made it to the final on this occasion, and whilst of course there is absolutely nothing wrong with predicting them to make it to the final and hoping and dreaming that they do, the idea that it should be an absolute guarantee rather than a hope is quite bizarre and actually counterproductive, because unless they win it, you're perennially going to be disappointed.
This extremely weighted level of expectation has been prevalent right throughout these finals, with the aforementioned #SouthgateOut trending on Twitter before their group games and round of 16 clash with Germany, based purely on which players Southgate put in the starting lineup and nothing more. It seems as though, in some people's eyes, we should somehow try to shoehorn Phil Foden, Jadon Sancho, Raheem Sterling, Harry Kane, Mason Mount and Jack Grealish all into the team at once, thus neglecting the sitter role in midfield which Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips have filled in brilliantly in these championships, and which, as we all should know by now, is pivotal to a team's success. There has to be that balance between caution and positive aggression, and Southgate has managed that expertly thus far, but when you get people like Mark Goldbridge saying that part of him wanted England to lose simply because Southgate went with a back five with Rice and Phillips in midfield against Germany, which he dubbed as quote unquote disgusting and vomit inducing, it comes across as nothing more than a petulant child whose parents brought them the wrong coloured iPhone for their birthday and now they're in a strop. It looks worse when the plan actually worked, and even more stupid when the formation actually did show Southgate's ambition to go deep into this tournament, because if they did set up with an extremely attacking formation against Germany, I wouldn't be making this video because England would be out, perhaps with a flourish, but eliminated nonetheless. We have to find the balance of realism and hope as England fans, rather than expectation and arrogance, which we seem to have done over the last few years, but during this tournament, it seems to have come back to the olden days when the press decided to say that we should always win every tournament because of the generation of players we had at our disposal. But if we do manage that balance between realism and hope, then we'll have the right attitude. Yes, I personally would have done a couple of things differently, with one of them giving Jadon Sancho a bit more game time than what he has had so far in these finals, but I'm not Gareth Southgate, and who knows, if he had gone with I, and perhaps any other England fan had wanted to see, we may not be in this position. Therefore, it is to Southgate's immense credit that he never doubted himself and shut idiots like me up. He stuck with Rice and Phillips in midfield throughout, and that decision has paid dividends. I wish I could wrap up there, but as mentioned earlier, there was a tweet that I saw that seems to be doing the rounds on social media, which says that England's route to the final has been somewhat undeserved, even going so far as to calling it a Mickey Mouse route. As soon as I saw that, I knew I had to analyse it and break down each of the points that I saw in that tweet one by one, because that's what my channel has come to now. The tweet should be on screen now, no doubt pervaded by a load of angry football Twitter fans wanting to try to dampen the incredible achievement of reaching the final, but I do think it is indicative of a bias against England purely because it is in vogue to do so right now, and realistically always has been. The first is that they played a load of farmers in their group, a group which contained the Czech Republic, who beat the Three Lions in Euros qualifying in October 2019, Scotland, who were England's perennial arch rivals and were keener than ever to put one over them, especially given that it was their first major tournament appearance in 23 years, and Croatia, who famously eliminated Southgate's squad out of the World Cup in 2018 at the semi-final stage. It's almost a lose-lose situation for England by the token that it is supposedly a farmers group, because if they are eliminated from it, then it's the subject of ridicule for the next few decades, but if they get through it, regardless of how convincingly or unconvincingly they progress, then everyone says it was inevitable and that no pride should be taken from it whatsoever. Let's not forget that group stages are not always the inevitable passage that they supposedly seem to be, especially for the big boys. At this very tournament, both France and Germany drew with Hungary, who were assumed by many pre-tournament to be the whipping boys of the group of death, and Spain struggled in their first two group games against Sweden and Poland, teams who are, arguably, of a similar standard to those in England's group. In the recent past, reigning world champions Italy couldn't even win a game in a group containing Paraguay, Slovakia and New Zealand at the 2010 World Cup. England and Italy were both eliminated in 2014 by Costa Rica, and at the Euros in 2016, Portugal had, on paper, the weakest group at the entire tournament, yet drew all three of their games against Hungary, Iceland and Austria, and only qualified through the back door as one of the best third place sides. What I'm getting at here is that the group stages can sometimes be choppy waters, and navigating your way through them, by whatever means necessary, is the primary objective, and England did that successfully. Obviously, they didn't always play the swashbuckling attacking brand of football that we would love to see, but you don't need to do that all the time if it isn't necessary, especially in the groups when you have 3 matches to try and get as many points as possible, and you can qualify in this tournament as one of the best third place sides, giving you that extra chance, just in case things do go slightly wrong. Furthermore, group stage performances are not always indicative as to how a team will do once they get to the knockout stages. To give a couple of examples, France in 2018 played two of the most boring games I've ever seen in my life against Peru and Denmark during the groups, but they won it with 7 points, which is what they needed to do, and then were a team transformed in the knockout stages. And at Euro 2020, the Netherlands stormed through their group with 9 points and 9 goals scored, yet fell to a 2-0 defeat in the round of 16 at the hands of the Czech Republic. Wait, hang on a minute. I thought they were meant to be farmers. Clearly, the Czechs haven't caught the memo created by Trophy Emoji, N'Golo Kante, the GOAT emoji, Trophy Emoji. By the way, this account wasn't the only one I saw this tweet from, and please don't go and harass them afterwards. There were a few others that I saw, but this was the first one that I saw when trying to look it up. The next point that they raised is that England robbed Germany by booing their national anthem pre-game. And before I get into my counter-argument for this, I must stress, of course, that I thought it was stupid and downright abhorrent that some England fans even did that, as well as singing the infamous 10 German Bombers song prior to the match, despite the FA requesting that they don't, which realistically, and regrettably, is like a red rag to a bull. Back to the point in question, this is another case of people trying to put down England's achievements and scraping the barrel to find something to blame for England managing to beat an extremely strong, albeit slightly underperforming, Germany side. England, simply put, were better on the day than the Germans, keeping the ball well and, barring the starts of each of the two halves, being the team who looked more likely to score. The booing was unjustified, undoubtedly, but I think that you should actually flip that in reverse and say that the Germans would then be more fired up to beat the English to silence their fans, rather than being intimidated by a couple of thousand Barrys and Freds in the stands, deciding that we should still hate the Germans for the actions of a maniacal dictator who died 76 years ago and wasn't even German. The team didn't look frightened by the antics of the English fans, drowning out the noise to focus on singing their anthem and then on the game. And yes, they were marginally outplayed, but that doesn't mean to say that they had a bad game as a result of some mindless idiots distracting them, because they most definitely didn't. They just so happened to come up against a better team on the day. You didn't have perhaps the worst argument in this entire tweet from a moral standpoint, where they say that England played against Chernobyl farmers in the quarters. To reduce an entire country to one nuclear disaster that ruined thousands of livelihoods is quite simply appalling, but since they have the anonymity that social media provides, they can get away with it, although that's another matter for another time. If you want to delve into technicalities, only one player in Ukraine's 26-man squad, Andrei Pyatov, was actually born prior to the tragic event, although he was born in Kropyvnytsky, some 417 kilometers away from the site. So from that standpoint, it's almost impossible to call them Chernobyl farmers anyway, given that Pyatov is the only one who was alive to see it happening. But of course, it's more wrong from a moral standpoint, as mentioned earlier. Admittedly, on paper, Ukraine were the worst team in the quarter-finals, but the team quality isn't always relevant in the knockout rounds, as the whole mentality of each squad changes once into the stage, where once you lose, you're eliminated. Teams who are considered underdogs will fight back hard, either through defense or attack, in an attempt to not let it slip away from their grasp and to cause an upset. Knockout always springs shocks at every tournament, as has been the case here with the Netherlands losing to the Czechs, and France, widely considered as favourites for the tournament prior to it beginning, blowing a 3-1 lead against Switzerland late on and then losing on penalties. That England actually beat Ukraine 4-0 and looked extremely convincing throughout it is of immense credit to Southgate's players for making it look easier than the occasion undoubtedly was. Plus, of course, in tournaments of this ilk, you can only play who are put in front of you. It's not exactly England's fault that they didn't play either France or Portugal or Belgium or Spain, etc., and nor is it their fault that they played against Ukraine in the quarters. That's just how the knockout stages of these types of tournaments work. It doesn't devalue your achievement by making it to the final, because as mentioned earlier, slip-ups are never impossible. Portugal in 2016, who of course won that tournament, faced off against Croatia, Poland and then Wales in order to get to the final, arguably an easier route, on paper, than what England have had this time around, yet they still made life tough for themselves in each of those games, needing a last-minute extra time winner to see off Croatia and penalties to progress past Poland. Tournaments are always capricious, but all you can do is beat whoever fate and the arbitrary draw put against you, and it's never about benefiting from some kind of preconceived subjectivity towards a certain national team to get to a final. I do agree with their next point that England had a massive home advantage as a result of playing most of their games at Wembley, because undoubtedly the home advantage is a big thing, and when something like this happens in a tournament which is supposed to be pan-European, which was a ridiculous decision in the first place and then made even more ridiculous as a result of the pandemic, there is an immediate slant towards England potentially doing well. You have to make the most of it, of course, and England most definitely have, but it was a major turning point in their favour. However, the final point of contention is, of course, whether or not Raheem Sterling dived to win the decisive penalty against Denmark on Wednesday. I've seen the replay of it quite a few times, as well as obviously a few still images, and yes, it is undeniably soft, and on first glance I thought it was a dive, but there is contact from two separate Danish defenders, and in today's game, that's enough to warrant a penalty, no matter how rightly or wrongly you perceive that to be. Forwards are hardwired to go down at the slightest bit of contact inside the box nowadays, and that's exactly what Sterling did, because there was contact from both Jensen and Mæhle, and it wasn't a clear and obvious error by the referee, hence why VAR didn't overturn it. It wasn't a blatant case of cheating by Sterling as some make it out to be, and certainly not on the level of something like Luis Suarez against Ghana in 2010 or Rivaldo against Turkey in 2002, and the referee's interpretation was that it was a penalty, as was corroborated by the VAR official. In any case, bad refereeing decisions and VAR decisions are so common now at major tournaments, and every team has benefited from one on their way to a major trophy win at some point. It just so happened to be England, and more specifically Sterling, who has been the subject of some bitter and oftentimes discriminatory vitriol throughout this tournament and indeed throughout this career, and especially as a result of him winning the penalty on Wednesday, who profited from this on this one occasion. This kind of thing isn't new, as I said. France beat Portugal in the semi-finals of the 2006 World Cup through a similarly contentious penalty won by Florent Malouda. Frank Lampard's shot crossed the line but wasn't given against Germany in 2010, and France took the lead in the 2018 World Cup final against Croatia after an extremely debatable penalty claim that went in their favour after VAR had a look at it. This happens all the time at major tournaments, but no one said that France had supposedly a Mickey Mouse road to the final on either occasion, although admittedly Twitter had only been founded 4 months prior to the 2006 World Cup final, or were the cheating scumbags of the tournament. Sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. Furthermore, the free kick that Denmark received that they scored from was pretty generous too, but no one seems to be really talking about that. You could say that all I've said in the last 10 minutes or so is England bias, and maybe it is, but all I'm trying to say is that this is how a tournament in this format works pretty much every time. You need that good fortune, the luck of the draw and the bounce of the ball to work in your favour sometimes if you're going to win a tournament, and perhaps England have had that throughout, but that's not to say that they have been the only beneficiaries from this in the entire history of international tournaments. It's just that they are one case out of plenty of others. Perhaps I shouldn't have psychoanalyzed that tweet as much as I have, because it may well have been a joke just to try to rile up the English supporters. It certainly worked on me, as you can tell, but there has to be a sense of perspective applied to whatever you tweet, especially if it's that kind of anonymous, and indeed disparaging, nature. In all, do England deserve to be in the final? Yes, they do. They've played well, especially in the knockout games, and they've beaten the teams who they came up against, barring Scotland of course, to make it to the final, where they will play Italy, who have also deserved to be in this position, and who I would say have been one of the two best teams, or three best teams in this tournament, alongside England and Denmark. Immense credit has to go to the England squad for drowning out the hashtags and the football Twitter malarkey that has been riled up against them throughout the finals, focusing on their jobs for the team, and to the coaching staff for training them so well and guiding them to this stage, and also drowning out the surrounding noise. I know that this has been a long video, but I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, and more seem to be added as I went on writing this. But that is where I will wrap up the video, and if you did enjoy this or agree with anything that I said, slap a like on it, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and comment with how you've perceived the tournament to be from the standpoints that I've mentioned. And, well, let's just see what happens on Sunday. Fingers crossed. But thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.